Patty Freeling falls at the end of the timeline of Hollywood theatrical cartoons. They were the last studio standing. Walter Lantz made Woody Woodpecker cartoons up through 1972. Terry Toons, Warner Brothers, Paramount, all threw in the towel in the late 60s. Patty Freeling was still making theatrical cartoons throughout the 1970s, and their last theatrical releases were in 1981.
We were the last studio, I think, that made theatricals, and that was on the strength of the Pink Panther power, that they said, let's make some theatricals.
The Inspector, which of course came off of the titles for Shot in the Dark.
Shot in the Dark was done in England, and that was the first time that they used verbatim the drawings from John Dunn's storyboard. Now, all the time John Dunn was there and he did storyboards.
His sense of timing on the storyboards, he was so funny, but he just kept this straight poker face, and you just weren't quite sure, where you were going with him.
Twist he put on the little characters and stuff were great. And if you look at Shot in the Dark, it's, falling down the stairs and all this stuff in that thing. It was from John Dunn's storyboard.
Based loosely on Inspector Clouseau. The character was voiced by Pat Harrington Jr., doing a hilarious French accent in the Peter Sellers vein. The character is assisted by Sergeant Doudou, who always seems to be a little smarter than the inspector himself, and the inspector is always foiled by his boss, the commissioner, who always is checking in on what the inspector is doing and ends up being exploded or something.
But I have to state one thing. Tom Yakutis did the backgrounds. Now, it was said before that backgrounds, in one of the interviews Frizz had, that the backgrounds were more or less a stage only with empty spaces for the animation to work. In Tom Yakutis's situation, he was such a fantastic artist, and each layout he made was so fantastic and a work of art that it enhanced the cartoons. It didn't take away from the characters. It just enveloped the inspector and Doudou in the cartoons. It just gave him the mood of France around them. So he was one of a kind.
The look of the series of cartoons is just beautiful. The art direction, the French settings, it's almost like a film noir in the way they did the color. It's beautiful.
The Inspector is a whole interesting, it's kind of not just sort of a rehash of something else, but it's kind of a unique idea. It almost seems more like one of the comic strips of the era, something like The Wizard of Id or BC. It's kind of these kind of left-of-center, non-traditional comic strips that were becoming popular in the 1960s, with a kind of unique style of drawing and a different kind of pursuit that's not really in the traditional Hollywood cartoon, hunter and hunted, chase, two characters chasing each other and beating each other up, which kind of had become the template over the last 20 years. And no, the Inspectors are kind of a unique thing unto themselves, and you gotta wonder if they were really for kids or adults or some combination of the two, because they don't really seem like kid cartoons of the 1960s. They really seem to be a whole interesting entity unto themselves.
I'll tell you, Jerry Shinneke did the designs on the Inspector and Doudou. One of the things about the Inspector, people would come and try to draw the Inspector, and they try to make a very neat looking thing. And Jerry once told me, he says, the Inspector, if you'd notice, nothing fits. The legs, he's just got these black spindly legs. Now one leg is thin at the top and goes to a thick ankle. The other leg starts thick at the top and goes to a thin ankle. That's deliberate to make it look off-center. The hat band, the brim, nothing fits on the hat. It's all a little off-kilter. And he did that with the whole character. So that made it unique. And Doudou was a fantastic character because he never opened his eyes. And every time the inspector would chew him out or say something, he'd say, "See," And Inspector would say, "Don't say si, say we." So that was a running gag throughout that thing.
You may turn in your police card. Si. And don't say si. Say we. Si. I mean we. I don't know what I mean. I want to go home.
But the other good thing about that series was the villains. These really funny villains they would have, like the three-headed brothers Mazzarelli, or the Blotch, who was really a blotch of ink, or paint, one-colored.
John Dunn did a lot of those characters, like the Mazzarellis and stuff. He put those crazy things together.
There's a cartoon that they did called Seek, Seek, Seek. I guess that's pronounced Sick, Sick, Sick. But all of the titles are done a la the Pepe Le Pew cartoons, where they're all kind of a faux French. But they did one called Sick, 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 which is sort of a redo of a Freeling, Tweety and Sylvester cartoon, Hide and Go Tweet, where Sergeant Doodoo, like Jekyll and Hyde, becomes a monster creature behind the inspector's back. And I think that was the cartoon where Frizz decided, hey, we can actually redo a lot of the stories that we did at Warner Brothers, and as Pink Panther cartoons or cartoon series or other things. And it was kind of the beginning of a long end. It took about another 12 years, but they started recycling a lot of the plots because really nobody noticed that they could redress these things in that way. But what was great about them, they were good stories. They were good plots. They were funny ideas. And they could get away with doing this. Now, my favorite inspector, honestly, is, and there's a lot of good ones, but my favorite one is one that's called Cirrhosis of the Louvre. Does that make any sense? The cirrhosis of the liver was a you heard about that because it was on TV commercials. They were always selling products that would help make that better. So they have a cartoon called Cirrhosis of the Louvre, and it takes place. And this is the one with the Blotch. And the Blotch is this blotch of paint who's going to be stealing paintings from the Louvre, and it's just a crazy character that I love the idea that it's so visual. That's what I like about it. That he can make himself invisible by melding in to the wall and becoming like a chameleon. And really that's it. It's not about jokes. It's not about, although there's plenty of them in there. It's just about the look and feel of that kind of a character. And to me, that's animation. That's what animation's all about. So you've got this frustrated Aardvark versus this I can't catch him ant. So that sort of, again, reminds you of Bugs Bunny. It sort of reminds you of the Roadrunner series, but it's its own new thing.
Und spritze this, and soup's on. Aha, here he comes.
Man, he must be having a bad trip.
For the ant and the aardvark to evoke the voices and the styles of Jackie Mason and Dean Martin, even though it sounds silly as I'm saying it, was just shows you that they were sort of in tune with the stylistic trademarks, the cultural icons of that particular era.
What made it special was these voice characterizations. I kind of remember going to the movies with my parents as a kid, and they would still run Ant and Aardvark cartoons. And my parents loved Dean Martin. They loved
The Ant and the Aardvark, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he would talk like Jackie Mason,
Mason, right.
Yeah, that was fun.
So that really got their attention. That was the good. I didn't really realize that until then. That one of the reasons they use what I call imitation voices. This goes back to Foghorn Leghorn, who was a takeoff of a popular radio comedian. But to use those kind of voices was a great gimmick for the cartoons because they knew that the audience was aware of who they were doing the imitation voices of, and it was a way for them to pay attention to the cartoon.
Jackie Mason was a familiar presence on TV variety shows and talk shows, and famously was on Ed Sullivan, and controversially was on Ed Sullivan.
At the time, I was in the office with Frizz Freeling, and they were kicking around the idea of the ant and the aardvark, and it came around and they said, well, we got to get a name for this guy. And I'm pretty sure I mentioned, I said, well, we got this guy named Jackie Mason. I was a great fan of his because of that accent.
This is a sight you won't see often. A grown aardvark making an anthill out of himself.
And they go, yeah, we'll give it a shot, you know. So when they approached to do it, they got John Biner to mimic Jackie Mason's unique style of accent.
John Biner, yeah. John Biner was hysterical.
They started John Biner doing the voices, and somehow Jackie Mason found out about it. And his lawyer came over to them some way, a phone call or in person, I don't know. But he said, I want to do the voice. He says, that's my signature voice. It's like copyrighted voice. And so they say, okay, so they had a session. He came in and did the voice. And as far as what my thought was, that he stopped halfway through and he told Frizz, he says, you know what? He says, John Biner does me better than I do. So he says, here's my solution. You have him do the voice and you pay me.
Yeah, if there's a favorite amongst the Ant and the Aardvark cartoons, there's one with the offbeat long title of Don't Hustle an Ant with Muscle. And that's a cartoon where the ant suddenly gains super strength by drinking a bottle of vitamins. And of course pounds the poor aardvark. And of course that idea has been used over and over again way back in the old days. You know, we saw that in the Tom and Jerry series and Sylvester and Tweety and King Size Canary. You know, it's the same idea, but it's done very, very well in this cartoon, which was directed by Art Davis.
What do you think I am, your waiter? Well, in that case, may I take your order, sir?
Did you ever have the feeling you were standing still and yet you were moving?
Crazy Legs Crane was part of the DePatie Freeling theatrical package for United Artists. And United Artists distributed Crazy Legs Crane to movie theaters in international territories. A character who appeared not only in The Blue Racer, but strangely enough in Dogfather. Basically, we've got this character, funny stuff, let's have him chase a dragonfly. And that's where it was at this point, where they'll introduce a character. If it's good, they'll figure out a way to reuse them, either in another cartoon or even make a whole series with that character. And off we go with this goofy character, which also was distributed to theaters in Europe and was part of that United Artists thing. But NBC couldn't wait, and they put him on the Pink Panther show. On Crazy Legs Crane, of course, there's a cartoon called Life with Feather, which is sort of a remakey-ish thing, kind of like those Sylvester and Son cartoons, where Sylvester is showing his son how to catch a giant mouse or an eagle or something. Here's Crazy Legs Crane trying to teach his offspring how to catch a dragonfly.
Such a simple thing, Father, and you botched it. How can I show my face in public?
The other studios like Hanna-Barbera, they would do, they had a factory. One guy would write something, another guy would do a storyboard, another guy would take the storyboard and he would make layouts, another one would take the next section. So no one mastermind director followed it through. It was done in a committee. Everyone did their thing. So eventually all of Hanna-Barbera's material, even though it was different shows, had the same pacing and the same feeling to it because it was done factory style, where DePatie Freeling's was done individually.
Corny Cole, Tom Yakutis, Art Leonardi. I mean, the design work.
Hawley Pratt's, his shorts were right on the money. Jerry Shinneke with Inspector Clouseau, that was his thing. That had a different feeling. Each new show we did had its own director that put their own touch to it.
because they do have more of a idiosyncratic look, more of a personal style to them.
And everybody that worked at the Patty Freeling were fantastic.
The atmosphere there, it was like family. And the thing that I liked most was they allowed you to be creative. When we had, they had meetings about the picture and talk about things, we would go to the meeting and they would ask us questions and we would answer them creatively.
And then all the other animation people there, Jerry Chinicki and John Dunn, the writers, the funny, funny writers. They were marvelous, marvelous people. And Corny Cole and just fun, wonderful people. It was an extremely great decade for me.
That's the thing about the Patty Freeling cartoons. The Patty Freeling cartoons of the 1960s, and I was saying before about how their design work is a progression on what came before. It isn't aping UPA. It isn't aping another studio. It isn't aping Hanna-Barbera or whatever's going on. It's original. It's its own thing. And it's really a last gasp, unfortunately, of these great talents that had been in the field for a long, long time. A last stand saying, here's what we can do. We're original. We're not derivative. You know, we're not Disney. We're not UPA. We're our own thing. And there is something there to be seen.